Unit 12 of the textbook mainly focuses on market failures, causes, and remedies. Some of the main causes of market failure are externalities and misallocation of resources. The remedies to fix a failure are law, private bargaining, and social norms, which can prevent market failure. The textbook uses the banana plantation in Martinique and Guadeloupe as its main example for market failure and the remedy that is used to fix it. So I'll use that example in my presentation. Now, my first point is I'm going to explain what is market failure. Markets fail whenever the allocation of resources within the market is not Pareto efficient. This can be due to several internal or external factors. Sometimes it can be difficult to assign a number to the problem in order to solve it. That is why there are several different remedies for market failure depending on what factors are present. Moving on, I will discuss the different causes of market failure. And the first one is externalities. Externalities are unaccounted for benefits or costs that are imposed on others by a firm. And this includes external costs and marginal social costs. Now, discussing marginal private costs, they are the costs within the firm to accomplish the purpose of the firm. For example, the cost for a factory to produce a product is the marginal private cost of the factory. As it stands, there are no externalities at play within this system. Externalities only occur if the factory contributes to a public bad or a public benefit without accounting for it. For example, if the factory decides to dispose of its waste in a nearby river, then it is imposing a cost on the cleanliness of the river, the fishermen who fish in the river, or public health. Dumping pollutants into the river may be cheaper than paying for refuse services, so that is a private benefit for the firm. But resulting health hazards or harm for fishermen is the public cost that is imposed. In another example, if a firm invests money into research without a patent, then the public can benefit from the private cost of the firm with the newfound knowledge. In this example, the firm is not being compensated by the public for the private cost of doing the research. And in this graph, you can see that when externalities are at play, then the supply curve goes up. And that changes the market equilibrium for this market. I need to discuss marginal social costs. The marginal social cost can be found once the marginal private cost of the firm is paired with the marginal external cost of the firm's actions, whether it be a public bad or public good. The firm must take the marginal social cost into account to adjust resource allocation in order to be Pareto efficient. The firm does not want to disproportionately allocate resources to contribute to a public bad without compensating the public, and the firm does not want to disproportionately allocate resources to contribute to a public good without themselves being compensated by the public. And now I'm going to move on to some examples of market failure. As I said in my introduction, the text uses the example of the banana plantation and the fishery in Martinique and Guadeloupe. And that example was the use of the pesticide chlordacone on the banana plantation. It was assumed in this instance that there was no alternative to growing bananas than by using chlordacone. The chlordacone would run off into nearby waterways, which polluted the nearby fishing industry. This is the imposing of an external cost onto another industry. This is Pareto inefficient because another industry is bearing a cost based on the resource allocation of the banana plantation. Therefore, this needed to be remedied. There are different ways to approach a remedy, which I'll discuss later in this presentation. But ultimately, both industries came to the solution for the banana plantation to decrease the number of bananas produced, which in return would decrease the amount of chlordicone used and would decrease the amount of pollutants in the water. And that brought it down to a satisfactory level. That was a Pareto efficient solution. Now I'm going to discuss some different kinds of markets and the goods that they have and some of the failures that they can run into. The first one I'm going to discuss is a market for rival and excludable goods. An example of a market failure within a market for a rival and excludable good is when a firm does not supply enough quantity to meet the demand for the good. This results in a deadweight loss, which is whenever the marginal cost does not equal the marginal benefits. This is a Pareto inefficient allocation of resources. The next market I'm going to discuss is non-rival and excludable. And the main example of a non-rival and excludable market is things like streaming services. There's no other rival for the service, but the firm has the right to exclude it. And that's things like a pay-per-view television or, like I said, a streaming service such as Netflix. And in this instance, a market failure occurs when the set price for the service is above what a consumer is willing to pay. This also results in a deadweight loss because of a loss of consumers if the price is raised higher than what they are willing to pay. Excuse me. Okay. Moving on, the next market I'll discuss is for rival and non-excludable goods. An example of a market failure within a market for a rival and non-excludable good is public fishing waters. This instance is also referred to as a tragedy of the commons. So in public fishing waters, it's rival among the fishermen, but it's non-excludable, meaning that nobody can be excluded from fishing in the waters. And that can cause problems. When one fisherman catches a fish, he receives all the private benefit of catching the fish at the cost of all the other fishermen who could have caught the same fish. This market fails when the body of water is overfished, causing all of the fishermen to suffer the cost. That is a tragedy of the commons. Another example is traffic. Licensed drivers are not excluded from driving on public roadways, but when too many people decide that they're going to drive at one time, then the roads can become crowded and all the drivers will bear the marginal cost. A single person receives the benefit of driving to their destination rather than walking, but at the same time, they contribute to a public bad. And the last example I'll discuss is non-rival and non-excludable. This is a good that is not rivaled and it cannot be excluded from anybody. It's pretty much open to the public. And the two examples that I have for non-rival and non-excludable are clean air and national defense. And this market failure is also referred to as free riding. Without a governing body, clean air is not a private good that can be bought or sold. Therefore, society bears the cost for clean air while also completely benefiting from it. In the example of national defense, a governing body bears the marginal cost of supplying the national defense for a nation, while society completely benefits from it. Moving on, I will discuss some remedies to market failure. First example I have is law. Law by a government can be used to remedy a market failure. They are put into place to ensure that external costs are not imposed without due compensation. Laws are also made to impose taxes on firms or goods to discourage use or to be redistributed to the public to account for the external cost. Governments are also assumed to enforce laws and also to enforce contracts between firms. The market cannot operate efficiently without laws. If a firm enters into a contract, well, I'm going to give an example. And this is a very basic example. If a firm enters into a contract with another firm to agree to buy a certain number of goods so that the other firm can produce a product, that's the instance. Without law, the firm can simply receive the goods from the other firm and produce the product without compensating them. Now, that's a very basic example, but I mean, on the base level, without law, firms can pretty much operate however they want to. There's nothing saying that firm has to compensate the other firm for the goods that they just bought from them. And in this instance, the firm that's producing the product, they get all of the benefit while imposing most of the cost on the other firm that supplied the goods. And this graph right here for tax revenue, you can see that tax revenue takes up, when taxes are imposed, it takes up some of the benefit from a market. But as you can see here, most of the time, the weight of the tax is shared by both the seller and the buyer. The next remedy to market failure I discuss is private bargaining. In the banana and fishery dilemma, both firms opted to privately bargain for a resolution. A law banning the use of chlordacone would not have been Pareto efficient because the banana plantation would have lost all of the profit and the fishery would not have earned the lost revenue that the banana plantation lost. That's leaving money on the table. That's not maximizing profits. As stated earlier, the agreement for one firm to purchase goods from another in order to produce a product is a very simplistic form of private bargaining. It is an agreement between parties to ensure that one will be compensated for the cost that is imposed on the other. And like I said, in the banana plantation example, both firms privately bargained to reach an agreement to reduce the amount of chlordacone used, which would reduce the pollution in the fishery, and that led to a Pareto efficient solution. And lastly, the main way that market failure can be avoided is through social norms, and that is essentially playing by the rules of the game. Most firms, while they're always involved in their own self-interest, most firms generally it's socially normal to play by the rules and to do right, to not try to exploit other firms for personal gain. And that's kind of the main remedy that's used above all other methods. In conclusion, markets fail when the allocation of resources is not Pareto efficient. When externalities such as marginal cost are not accounted for, then the allocation of resources is not Pareto efficient. In a rival and excludable market, if the firm's supply does not meet the demand of the market, then it is a market failure. If a firm in a non-rival and excludable market sets prices too high, in relation to the demand, then the firm loses potential revenue from lost consumers, which is also a market failure. Other examples include the tragedy of the commons and free riding in markets for non-excludable goods. The three main remedies for these market failures are laws in the form of legislation, taxes, and enforcement, Private bargaining, which is an agreement between two firms to reach an agreement to either compensation or reallocation of resources to reach Pareto efficiency. But in the end, ultimately, most firms operate under social norms and play by the rules of the game to avoid these problems.